Welcome to this edition of the Student Life Edvisors podcast. My name is Tré.
I'm Elaine.
And we are bringing to you an exclusive episode where we will be interviewing one of the top individuals in the game, Tess Michaels. So Elaine, would you introduce our guest with her wonderful bio?
Yes, of course. We're so excited to have Tess Michaels, the founder and CEO of Stride Funding, which is a venture-backed student financing company that offers more flexible alternatives to traditional student loans via income share agreements and deferred tuition agreements. She founded Stride from a student-first perspective as an MBA at Harvard Business School. She is a serial entrepreneur. We love entrepreneurs here. We love talking to entrepreneurs. That successfully exited her previous company while completing her BS and her BA at the University of Pennsylvania. Tess worked in investment banking at Goldman Sachs and in a private equity at Vista Equity Partners. Tess is recognized, and this is a great thing. We love having people who are influential, nationwide influencers out there. She's in Forbes 30 under 30. So thank you so much for joining us, Tess. Tré and I have been talking about this all week. We're excited to get your perspective and learn more about income share agreements and other products that Stride has to offer as ways that can help students.
Great. Thank you all so much for having me.
Wonderful. So we're just going to jump straight into the conversation, Tess. Something we'd like to know. What do you think is one of the biggest issues facing students today?
The benefit of having founded Stride, as I mentioned, very much from a student first perspective, right? So very much sitting in the seat and realizing that, it's a really big bet to pursue higher education. It's taking a bet on yourself, and the sticker price can be very intimidating. And oftentimes I think as students, you just really want to make sure that you're pursuing a program where, the outcomes are going to be really strong when you graduate, and that, everyone is really aligned and helping you succeed, and you're getting the right support when you're in school. And so, the areas I'm really focused on is how do you really give students that peace of mind around ensuring that they're going to get a great job once they graduate. And then also that they're, choosing programs that, they have a lot of clarity around what the value of that program looks like. And then lastly, ensuring that they feel like they'll get the right support when they're in school. And oftentimes, we just don't know which schools are going to give us the right, resources, whether that's for recruiting, whether that's, when you're in school for your exam prep, or, whether that's just emotional support, because it's a lot to get through, that moment in time. And I think that's really where we want to come in and kind of change that narrative.
Yeah, we talk to students all the time, and when we're giving them advice, as much as we do our best to give them everything they need to know, there's always a huge question mark over, how much is that school actually going to cost you? You see the sticker price, but then, financial aid is available. So how do you kind of deal with that, and how do you allow a student to really strive in the end and set them up for success?
Totally. I think, we always advise students for look, first, always look for free money, right? Grants, scholarships. We have a scholarship database on our site. And that's very much because free money is the best type of money, right? And after that, how do we make sure students are taking out all of these subsidized federal loans that they can take, which again is for any of your degree programs. But then, it's really about looking at, side by side, what are the costs? What's the, duration of these products? What's the flexibility of these products when you compare private loans versus, unsubsidized federal loans versus, alternative options like Stride's income share agreements? And how do we make sure that students have the right tools to compare those payments on the back end, and also the right transparency and education to really understand, what's best for them based on their situation, right? So
income share agreements, I know we've tossed it out a few times, that's a Stride specialty. Can you explain a little bit the difference between an income share agreement and something like a student loan, something more traditional that we hear?
Absolutely. So, I think it's interesting because student lending is one of the few industries where, you haven't seen that much innovation or change in the structure, right? I mean, it's, for the most part, most traditional loans, you have your principal, which is the amount that you borrowed, and then the interest that you're paying on top. And, usually when you're, in school, you're accruing that interest and any moments that you have to take off because let's just say you're unemployed or something happens for a health reason. And so your costs keep accruing or increasing over time. And typically from a duration perspective, most private loans are, 10 years or longer in length. And lastly, when you think about kind of flexibility, those payments stay the same regardless of what your outcomes look like, if it takes you a little longer to find a job or anything like that. What we really wanted to do was figure out, how do you really align the cost of education with the value that you're getting from that education?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways to do that is just slightly tweaking the structure of the product so that your payments are actually tied to your income. So when you're earning less, you're paying less. And, COVID was in a moment in time that was completely unexpected, where even if you have total confidence in your job, folks got furloughed, things were tough, people had health issues they needed to take off. And so just making sure you almost have that insurance built in, but more importantly, making sure that it changes the narrative around us not just being a financial provider, but really a partner, because we only succeed if these students succeed. And so we do a ton of career support on the back end. For example, if you're a nursing student, we have NCLEX prep, which is the nursing exam prep. If you're an engineer, we have technical interviewing prep. All of these resources that we're giving to students just because we know that we're invested in their future and their outcomes, because that's what, the structure of the product naturally enables, right? And so again, it's a very flexible structure. The payments are always meant to be affordable, and it's also much shorter. Our longest contracts are 5 years, which is great, because how many stories you hear of people who are 20 years into their life and still paying back student loans. I think that was one of the pain points we definitely wanted to address.
Oh yeah. I mean, the pain point of a 10-year repayment when you actually pay it off in 10 years versus, what people are really paying off loans on is huge there.
Totally.
And being tied to student success, we love to see that. We definitely love to see any company reaching out, sometimes, even though it is still essentially getting money up front to help you cover the cost, it is an investment in the future. But, when the company behind you who's allowing you to use those extra funds, and either a loan or ISA is really devoted to you, that's just fantastic.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I like the fact that when you were explaining what Stride is doing as far as helping the individuals who are getting these ISAs beyond the paying for school aspect of it, the fact that you're partnering with those individuals so that they can get the assistance needed to get through a specific program, like that's wonderful. And I think that just shows that it's more about what's happening on the money side. It's really about helping those students. So I love that. That's so awesome.
Thank you.
So ISAs are definitely not considered traditional in any way. How would a student even get to understand if they qualify, if this is an option for them? How do they kind of learn about it?
Yeah. So it's amazing to just see, recently just how much more awareness they've been of just alternative structures, but you're completely right. I think, for us, there's a few ways. First of all, a ton of different universities have been adding us to their lender list so that in financial aid offices, students can actually find out about these options, which I think is always really positive. We also work with a lot of really great partners that help students compare different financing options for school. And that's a great way to find out about our resources. But the easiest to see if you're eligible is you go to our website. I mean, it's stridefunding.com. You can see if you're eligible in 10 seconds. Literally, you just type in 3 fields of information, and then it immediately tells you what your rate would look like and if you qualify. And you can actually play with the tool and say, well, if I earned this much, how would my payments change? And so it's really simple. And then if you qualify, the full application takes less than 10 minutes to do, and you'll be approved same day for funding. So it's meant to be really seamless, because I will say, as you probably know well, a lot of times with a lot of the traditional lenders, you're waiting weeks to find out, what that looks like. And, it's already a really stressful process. So the last thing you want to do is add any stress around just clarity of kind of your status. So.
Oh, yeah. And, one of the interesting things I think about an ISA is, because we get questions about, what are my options out there? We always bring up ISAs as an option.
Yeah.
Not everyone applies. But everyone, by default, I think every time I get the question of, what is the interest rate?
Yeah.
I'm borrowing money.
Totally.
What is the interest rate? So can you explain a little bit of kind of the interesting aspect of this, where ultimately there is really no.
Yep, totally. So the way we think about it is, first of all, I think, we have the benefit of, most of our capital comes from a large impact investor. So these are large, nonprofits that, primarily fund our student capital. So we're able to really compete from a price perspective with your traditional loans, but then have all of the flexibility built into the product. But the way we look at this is more so around budgeting, right? Imagine, you're budgeting your normal bills and you're like, I'm going to do X percentage of my, take home toward rent and X percentage toward food. And the nice thing about an income share agreement is you always know, let's just say illustratively, it's, 4% of your income over 5 years, right? It's again, 5 years long. So it's pretty short duration. And you can just budget that it's always 4%. If you are in less 1 year, it's okay. You'll pay less, right? And so it's almost changing the narrative from, instead of it being a fixed dollar amount, it's a fixed percentage of your income. And so it's way easier for you to account for how that fits into your life relative to your other costs or your other expenses. And then as far as how we think about the interest rate, you're totally right. The biggest difference is, unlike a traditional loan where you owe the same amount regardless of your ability to repay, for these products, if for any month, let's just say you're earning below our minimum income threshold, which let's just say is $40,000, then your payments pause during that period, and there's no accruing expenses, so it's not like you're penalized for that. And that's really meant to be student centric, because typically when students are below that threshold, it's because something tough is happening in their life. And we just, life's not a straight line, and we want to make sure that we're able to be there during those moments. So.
Oh yeah. That's great. Cause I definitely think some of the ways people think about it is, when they're thinking of income-based repayment, income-driven repayment in the federal student loan program, where their payments are based on their income. However, there is the added element of interest. And there are situations where we get into the technical world of negative amortization, where you're accruing more interest than you're paying off every month. And even though you're making payments, I'm sure you've heard this just in the industry or students complaining, yep. I've been making payments for years and my balance went up. It didn't go down.
100%.
So that's where I think there's difference. A little,
yes,
yeah,
exactly right.
We've talked a lot about, how ISAs kind of work. We've talked about some of the problems facing students. And, honestly, I go back to the interview we had with you it's on our Edvisors.com blog about finding a path to success and finding your own path to success. And you really eloquently there described, a lot about financial literacy and the tools and what people need to know. And you had some really great advice there about, the really simple thing to do that is not necessarily easy to do because it's harder in practice of, talking about financial literacy and, not spending more than you make. Yep. So I think tying that together with the ISAs and everything you've kind of explained, it's really, you're positioning yourself as, being a thought leader in the space to help students along the way. So would you say, or how would you say that Stride is really positioned, to really help students in the future and in success?
Yes, absolutely. This is something that's always been, so interesting for me to think about is just, even when we look at our education system, we're taught so many different subjects, but we're not actually taught much about, in general, financial literacy, right? Like, how do we pay taxes? How do you budget? What is insurance, and how, what types do you get, and what's the differences? All of these things that are actually really important life skills that we need to know and are never actually formally, kind of shared that. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about, one, just creating content. So blogs of our own around how you think about budgeting, how you think about each of these pieces. Nothing to do with specifically our income share agreements, but more so just things that we think our students should understand for just having a whole, fulsome life, right? And making sure that they feel like they have the support they need. And then as far as other tools we do, on the front end, we build a lot of calculators just to help students compare different options. And it doesn't matter if they choose Stride's option or not. It is just making sure that they understand what their private loans are going to cost them and understanding what their income share agreements are going to cost them, and just being able to sort out what the, different forms of aid that they're taking looks like and what they need to pay out of pocket so that they feel like they're coming prepared to pursue that program. And then on the back end, we have, as I mentioned, an entire career support portal. And a lot of that is support around how they think about, simple things, negotiating their salary once they get a job. Like a lot of people are just not taught little tricks on that front. Or how should they think about, preparing for those interviews and actually tracking them? Just like when a company is tracking the different applicants or candidates that they have for a job, as an individual or a student, you should be tracking the different jobs that you're applying to and how you think about that. So we've integrated all sorts of tools to just make it easier for students so that, this process feels a little bit less scary and they don't feel as alone, right? And I think that's really important to everything that we've done and so core to our mission.
No, that's wonderful. And I think that it's awesome, as I mentioned before, how you all are providing these additional resources to help students along the way. And earlier you mentioned something that really was near and dear to my heart, because with this podcast, sometimes we talk about budgeting and how that works. And I thought that an interesting feature of the ISA, when you were discussing that it's percentage based. When you said that, for example, if it's 4%, then for someone who's creating their budget, they can look at the income that they're bringing in, factor in that percentage, and then just say, okay, this is the money that I have to work with for the rest of the month, regardless of that. I mean, that's wonderful. I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit more, but yeah, someone making that budget, totally. They can work with that.
100%. I mean, I think, look, at the end of the day, like, life is about understanding, like, what does your end pie look like, and how are you prioritizing, how much of that you're saving, how much of that is, for, the fun things you're paying for, and for the things that you just need, like your phone bill and your utilities and your rent. Right. And I think, it's kind of interesting that most systems in life that we have are always just based on fixed dollar amounts, even though your life situation is constantly changing. And for us, we're trying to change the narrative to say it's not about the absolute number. It's about how it impacts your savings at the end of the day, which is really a percentage of your take home, right? And I think that's really what our structural change is trying to get at. And it also really does create that alignment, right? Because like we said, we succeed when the student succeeds, right? Everyone wants to invest in helping that student find that job and do really well in it. And I think that's, something you just haven't seen in education, right? Like the schools get paid the same tuition, regardless of if students graduate or don't graduate, and whether they get a job or they don't get a job, and whether that job was in the program that the student pursued or didn't, right? And so how do we start, creating accountability in these systems and helping students make decisions on the front end about the value of different programs based on how the financing changes? And I just want to take 1 second and double click there. But, one of the things that I'm really inspired by is that we publish all of our pricing transparently on our website. And, a student who's, let's just say, is pursuing nursing could go on our site today and compare what the percentage of income would be if they went to one school versus another, which implies difference in quality and outcomes. Because a lot of what we're looking at is like, how likely is the person to graduate based on that school's track record, and what do those programs look like? And I think that's kind of the beauty of actually being almost like a value tool for students to actually make enrollment decisions, not only have more affordable funding once they're in the program. And you don't get that with a traditional private loan, because that's entirely priced based on your credit score, not based on the quality of these programs and the quality of these schools.
Thank you for making it to this point in the podcast. As you know, we're bringing you a bonus code with every episode. Use the bonus code STRIDE for 100 points on scholarshippoints.com. Remember that you can use those points to enter scholarships available exclusively on the website. Once again, use the code STRIDE, that's STRIDE. Now let's get back to the episode.
When we talk about the student debt crisis, we're always kind of talking about what's happened. We've talked about outstanding student debt. We're talking about the struggles that families are going through now, dealing with student debt that they took out 10, 20, 30 plus years ago. And, ISAs and like things that Stride is doing is really, having you focus a little bit more on that front end. I know I have that conversation about the front end constantly of, the research now to prevent problems later. But, it's really difficult sometimes to get people to hear you or get people to take the time now to really look at outcomes. And, there's a huge talk in even like the federal world of things like gainful employment and accountability. But, it's not only money, sometimes it's also time.
Yes, 100%. I actually think, COVID was as tough as it has been on us as a community. The one thing that I think it did that is positive is it accelerated the narrative around, how do people spend their time and what is the value of education? Because we saw a lot of schools and programs go online, right? Charge the same tuition, if not sometimes higher tuitions, with a very different degree of, programming than students were getting otherwise. And all of these new schools, like new school formats, started to pop up where you saw growth in online degree programs, true online degree programs, right? Where they have the infrastructure built for that type of learning. You saw boot camps, so these like standalone entities that had 3-month accelerated courses to learn software engineering or, UI UX design pop up. And then you saw universities creating these certificate programs for employees to upskill and reskill. And I think that really changed the view of individuals saying, okay, well, my time and resources are both valuable. And, there's not a one size fits all solution of what is the best, right? Like for some people, you really want to go, let's just say you want to do a graduate program, a 2-year, master's program might be the best fit for you. For others, doing a certificate program that's a few months long might make more sense because you just have limited time and you want to just quickly sprint and get those skills, right? And I think that's one thing that, we at least really appreciated was we have funding for, programs across the board, and you just see appetite changing and a lot more introspection from the student side on which makes the most sense based on their life circumstances. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think one thing that kind of came out of that we started realizing is we saw, Stride's press release about the deferred tuition agreement that's really, tied into those boot camp type of programs. So that's more of like a relatively newer type of option. Could you explain a little bit about how that works and what it is?
Yeah. So, our philosophy is we really believe in outcomes-based products, right? So our products always have a tie toward the fact that individuals should be placed into really meaningful jobs and make sure that they have that ability to repay before they make payments. But we have different variations of this. And one of them, which is the deferred tuition agreement, there's still that minimum income threshold, but then there's fixed dollar amounts that students pay every period they're above that threshold. And so, it's basically different flavors so that we can understand for some individuals, they want to budget as a percentage, right? For some, they want to understand what that dollar amount looks like. But at all points in time, they want to have that insurance built in, where essentially they're ensuring that, they are, again, kind of in a point in time where these payments are affordable. And, that's been really exciting for us to also just see the, ability for us to partner across the non-degree and degree market, right? So we support undergrad students and graduate students, again, primarily in healthcare and STEM. And then in the certificate market, we've partnered with really amazing high impact boot camps and programs where, a lot of students are coming from non-traditional backgrounds. And this is really their pathway toward, economic mobility. And that to me is just personally really exciting. And these are just tools to kind of enable that.
Oh, that's sweet. That's awesome.
You've had a lot of experience. You kind of explained how Stride came from that student-centered type of mentality and being there. What was something you wish you knew sooner in your education? It seems like you solved a lot of problems that maybe you faced, but in your own words, what is something that you wish you had known when you started the whole journey?
Yeah. So I think, for me personally, I think there are a few things. One is, I think just being in a school setting, recognizing the importance of balancing all of the academic work with learning by doing, just throwing yourself in, was really important. Like for graduate school, I did a lot of independent projects where I was really able to be out in the field, especially as I was starting Stride, really talking to students and learning from that perspective. If you're in technical fields, like let's just say you're an engineer, like build your portfolio and do a lot of side projects where you're just, doing it as much as you can to get comfortable before you actually get on the job, right? And I think, you can learn a lot by, taking tests and reading and trying to get smart. But, the best way to get up learning curves is to really throw yourself in and be outside your comfort zone and make sure that you're just soaking that up. And then the second is, I think in general, like you are, the average of the people that you surround yourself with, and like find kind of your own personal board of advisors, like find your mentor, find your, cheerleader, find your best friend or your confidant, and like figure those people out, sooner rather than later, so that you really feel like you're constantly, forcing yourself to grow and to just have that balance from just being, around amazing people who kind of raise you higher. And I think education is an amazing, vehicle for that, where you're just in an environment where you really can just learn from some of the most amazing people and soak that up. So, yeah.
I love that advice. Having your own board member, having them on speed dial anytime you need anything.
Exactly.
Since we're talking about something you wish you did earlier in education, just bringing it back to the students who are going through that process at the moment, what do you think that students should be doing right now to kind of make sure they're managing their time well through as they go and get their degree? And then what if they're just thinking about, should they continue college? Should they finish with their degree or whatnot? If they're kind of in flux, especially with the COVID and pandemic happening.
Totally. Yeah. So there's a few things I'd say there. I think, first of all, when you're joining any program, whether it's undergrad, graduate school, certificate program, make sure that you're doing your research early. You're talking to people, peers, to learn, talk to your financial aid office, make sure that you're using, amazing sites to compare different options. I think that's really important. And then, we have a lot of resources, as I'm sure other lenders do, on our website to just help you think through your financing options. Right. And so I think that's step one, is just do your research, get smart on it, know your options. The second is, once you're actually in these programs, figure out what all of the resources on campus look like, and make sure that, whether it's, academic support, job search support, emotional support, you're just, constantly figuring out what are the right avenues for each of those different pieces for yourself. And, it is a really stressful time for a lot of students right now, right? They came into school expecting one thing, and it's just a different, animal than I think a lot of folks, had anticipated. And so, that is, it's unfortunately something I think a lot of people are experiencing. So one, just students realizing they're not alone in feeling that, and just feeling like their headspace is different, and it's overwhelming at times. But I do think that, there is real beauty and value in education, regardless of the form, right, of education. And if you've already invested a lot of time into a program, like figuring out how you, either push through or think through what those options look like on the back end, so that, you can pursue something you're really passionate about after school, right? And, and that's kind of what education really enables you to do, is to have just a lot more choice in what your options look like after school. And I think, it is, again, a difficult moment, but figuring out how you really get that confidence, whether it's people on campus or friends or family, it's just, important, because, it is a strange point in time, and we're all going to look back at some point and say, wow, can't believe we made it through this. And when you do, you'll be that much more grateful for it. But, that'd be my way of thinking about it.
Thank you all for tuning in to this edition of the Student Life Edvisors podcast. We're so grateful that you tuned in to check out and see what we had going on for this go around. Once again, we want to thank our special guest, Tess Michaels, for answering the questions, providing so much insight, and informing everyone about ISAs and what Stride funding is doing to change the game when it comes to paying for school. So Tess, we are so grateful that you spent your time to have that conversation with us, and we love to have you back whenever possible.
Oh, thank you.